Hey, my legion, how you all doing today? I'm here to review Netflix docuseries about Vince McMahon called Mr. McMahon. It just dropped on Netflix yesterday. I watched like 3 episodes, and then another episode, and then I was on Richard's panel and then Dana's panel too. And I dropped off Dana's panel to review the last couple episodes. So I wanted to review it. I remember I mentioned on Dan's panel, I said it's really good so far. Then Gordon was there saying there's no need for me to watch it because I lived it. Well, no shit, I lived it too. If you don't want to watch it, I don't care. You're gonna miss out. I mean, you watch shows like this, you learn more about the business. It's more information about the subject. People ask why I'm so knowledgeable of some subject matter because I watch stuff about it. I read up on it. If you don't want to watch it, that's fine. It's just like we talk about music, and he'd ask me like, "You know who the Beatles are?" Like, no shit, I know who the Beatles are. It was offensive. I remember he asked Turtle who the Beatles were, and she got pissed. Said, "No, I don't know who the goddamn. Of course, I know who the Beatles are. I don't talk about the Beatles except with Carrie when Carrie was still around, because Carrie and I both think the Beatles suck. I think they're horrible. I think they're one of the most overhyped bands ever. Well, anyways, it reminds me of my dad. As far as movies and TV shows is concerned, he's like, you see it, you watch, you forget about it. That's it. You can't talk about it, not like that. We used to go to family reunions, and then he say, "Hey, don't talk about movies, don't talk about TV, don't talk about books. They'll think you're weird, they'll think you're strange, they'll think you're weird." And then I go over there. I mean, it was a contempt for the. I felt contempt for a lot of the relatives. He said, "Well, they don't care what you think, regardless." I felt complete contempt for them. And then it's just go there. It's all football, baseball, football, baseball. They ask, "What's your favorite team?" I say the Steelers and Pirates, which was true. And the only relative we really, well, I mean, I talk to relatives some too. I do love them. But I mean, it's just like that one trick. That's the only thing we really talked about, except for Uncle Wayne. Because my sister and I gravitated towards him because he ran a bunch of movies here. He saw movies all the time. I remember one time he had a heavy metal TV shirt, t-shirt on, the one with the car floating in space, and we loved talking to him about movies and stuff. Well, anyways, like I said, Netflix dropped this bombshell of a TV docu series that Triple H demanded Netflix not show, and also Vince McMahon tried to pay them to yank it off the air so it never be shown by anybody. And it was a 6-part series. I think they started doing interviews back in 2021, and it was from the people that did Tiger King and stuff. And they were saying like this interview was done before the allegation against Vince McMahon was public. It's about the lawsuit with Janel Grant, I think her name is. Well, anyways, I mean, with my history with wrestling, started out way when I was like fifth, 5 or 6 years old, right? It was Saturday afternoon. They used to have like Mutual Omaha Wild Kingdom, and then they have like a $6 million man. And I love the episode that had him and Sasquatch in it. And my dad was telling me that Sasquatch was played by pro wrestler Andre the Giant. So I knew who Andre the Giant was. I knew who George Animal Steel was. They didn't really show wrestling that much until I remember, like in second grade, they'd have like during the summertime, they have like this real low budget hour-long show on Saturday afternoons, like 3 o'clock. I used to love watching it. I don't remember watching the other house, but I remember. And then all of a sudden, when it was done, it was done. My dad said, "I guess that's not on no more." But my dad never really seeked out anything. You know what I mean? I wasn't allowed to read the TV guide. And my dad said, my dad was against reading. My dad thought reading was stupid. I loved to read. Now, my mother was, she said she doesn't see a problem with me reading. My mother was against me watching horror films. And of course, guess what? It drew me to horror films. Well, anyways, I remember like watching those shows, and it went off for a couple summers, and then like in '79, Vince McMahon had like that syndicated show. It was like once a week called Superstars of Wrestling. And I remember watching that, And then we that was like once a week on Saturday. They had like Bob Backlund on there, and they had like, I mean, it was more slickly produced. And I remember when we had got VCR. We used to rent wrestling tapes somewhat. And then they had like the first WrestleMania, and I think they started like well, this is all in the first episode of the Vince McMahon thing. They talk about what that Saturday night main event, which was really cool. And then it was really weird because when I went to Fort Bragg, they started having like on Friday nights every so often. It was like for an hour at 10 o'clock. It was weird they switched that like that. And it talked about Vince McMahon's rise to popularity. Because I was a big wrestling fan up for when I first started knew about Andre Giant up till maybe 1993, and it goes up to like right about when they had like the WrestleMania 7 when I remember I was in the military and it was during Desert Storm, man. Sergeant Slaughter was our Iraqi sympathizer, and I remember how mad our fellow soldiers were. I was mad about too. I mean, they were seeing like some really graphic stuff how they wanted to do away with Sergeant, and he was getting death threats for real. And then they kind of laid back on that some, and they had that match at WrestleMania 7. And I remember being in Fort Bragg, and he was saying, "I want my country back," and he was trying to be real patriotic and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. I think that kind of killed Sergeant Slaughter, but I still like Sergeant Slaughter. I mean, that was all part of the business. And I know Vince McMahon said like, well, I talked about him taking over the territories and buying the company from his dad, of course. And he said he doesn't care if he hurts feelings or anything like that. It's all for what's best for business. And then it starts going on to like the whole thing with steroids and all like the thing with the ring boy allegation and that one with that female referee being abused by Miss McMahon. And around that time, oh, there's so much bad press. So I kind of lost interest around 93, 94, and I didn't watch it again. And I guess during that time, they're talking about the Monday Night Wars between WCW and WWF. And I started getting back into it like 1998, and that's when WWE started the Attitude Era. But all this stuff is well known to the wrestling fans, but there's lots of interesting interviews and stuff, so you do learn a lot more. Um, the Attitude Era came back because I got it back into '98, and they talk about that. They talk about him buying WCW, and he said, "You got to take your competition and strangle him by the throat." And what else was there? But then they it was weird because whenever WCW was gone, it's like he didn't have any more competition, and then he started a whole ruthless aggression thing, like trying to different start with like John Cena and then like smack talking and stuff like that. That did pretty well, and then after a while, they talked about like how he got his family involved, like with Linda McMahon, like saying like he was having an affair behind Linda McMahon's back with Trish Stratus. Well, right in front of her face, though, she was like comatose in a wheelchair and all this other stuff, fighting with his son, fighting with his daughter. Uh, they didn't talk about China that much. Um, and they talked about like Hunter really marrying Stephanie McMahon, which is common knowledge. Um, and he kind of put them together. And then after that, they were saying like they were talking about him trying to do other things, like him faking his own death. And it was weird because that's when the Chris Benoit stuff happened with him killing himself and his wife and kid. And it came out at the same time. And then Vince McMahon said, "Well, we are going to have an angle, but we're here to celebrate Chris Benoit." And this was before all the allegations said that about him killing his kids because they didn't know. They thought it was just a freak accident or something like that. They didn't know. A whole show about it. And then next time he came on, said there'll be no mention of Chris Benoit ever again from the horrible actions he had. And there was this guy named Chris Nowinski that was a Harvard graduate, and he suffered a concussion. Wait a second. I don't want to stop recording. Okay. He suffered a concussion. And then with what happened with Chris Benoit, he asked his dad if he could, if he had, he started this whole thing about the effects of concussion, this whole big study. And he asked his father if he could examine his brain. And his father reluctantly said yes. And he found that he had like horrible ramifications for being like concussed all the time. I can't remember, there was a certain term for it, and that led to him not thinking clearly, doing what he did. And then eventually Vince McMahon started to have them start to listen. And he asked, "Well, I'm kind of interested to see what you have to say." And then he talked to all the wrestlers, and that's when they started like doing all these moves that could hurt the wrestlers, like chair shots, no more power drivers, no more anything. And yeah, I know people complain, say it was a more watered down wrestling, but I mean, it was to keep the people safe. And then eventually he reduced it from TV 14 to TV PG. I mean, it's more family. It used to be really family friendly. Then Attitude Era came in to compete, and then it was kind of right for a while. Then they reduced it again to TV PG, and then sometimes even TVG, because on the WB, there was a show called Saturday Morning SmackDown. It was on for like a year. It didn't do very well. People said they hated the show. It was like a half-hour show, more kid-friendly, and they would show wrestling matches, but things they would usually show got edited out. And it was weird showing how they would show a match, because if there was like a scene that was too explicit, they just show the announcer reaction to it if it was too violent for TVG. It was weird, but people hated that show. I thought it was okay. I usually a lot of times I would sleep through it, I forget about it. And they would have like a certain guy like being like the guy being the host of the show, and like end up being Mick Foley, you know. It was okay, but people hated the show. I remember it, There was other shows that failed, like WWE Confidential, which I thought was interesting. They had a show called Jacked on UPN late night, Saturday night, and it was like a recap show. Um they used to have Raw AM on USA at like 2 o'clock. It was like a recap of Raw, and they had like Sunday Night Heat. They had a whole bunch of shows. Oh, and also they talked about buying WCW. Anyways, led up to that, and then what else was there after that? I'm trying. There were 6 episodes, and it all leads up to the scandal that happened that rocked Vince McMahon and the WWE. And then they talked about how they became a private company, and they were on opened up on Wall Street, and they said like one thing I knew, uh they had a restaurant in Times Square. I knew about that, but I didn't know they had like they opened up this big bill for gambling and stuff. I didn't know about that. And they said like things started plummeting. No, it wasn't as popular. And they closed up the eatery, because I heard like I read stories like if there's no wrestlers in there, usually it was pretty dead in there. It didn't do very good business. I mean, after a year or so. And I don't know about the casino. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know they opened up one up. That's one thing I didn't know. And there's interviews in this throughout with Vince McMahon, Trish Stratus, Booker T, John Cena, Cody Rhodes, Undertaker, Hulk Hogan, uh, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bruce Pritchard, and some other people didn't like him, like that guy from a couple of guys from Wall Street Journal. And then finally, after that episode, the final episode's called The Finish. It came up episode 6, and they're all about an hour long, or the last two are like an hour, 4 minutes, hour 5 minutes. And basically, that was like stuff that led up to Vince retiring from the company, right? Leave it to Stephanie McMahon, and then him coming back in 2023, and then it talks about like them selling with combining with all the oh, what was it, kickboxing, to do the TKO Productions. They went with UFC, and formed like TKO Production, where he had 49% of stock 49% control, and they had 51. So he was no longer in control. And they were talking about how starting and like January 2024, they said like they're leaving USA Network and they're going to start having Raw on Netflix streaming. It is supposed to happen January of 2025. Okay. And then they were talking about like the whole thing with that Sean Grant lawsuit coming about, and that's whenever they stopped having like interviews with Vince McMahon, like 2022, because a lot of these interviews were in 2021. That was like a while in the years in the making, a few years in the making, and he came back. He said he left, but he came back 2023, and then he left for good. Whenever like the allegation really came out, and they asked Bruce Pritchard what he thought of it. He said he saw some episodes of the show, and he said, "What do you think of it?" He said he thought they sucked because they were a gotcha piece, trying to make Vince McMahon look like a jerk, right? And he was saying like they even talk about like whenever my wife had cancer, terminal cancer, Vince McMahon gave her the best care that money could buy, and she had like a life sentence of 4 years, and that was like about 24 years ago. And he said they didn't talk about stuff like that. It's humanitarian stuff because he said like Vince isn't perfect, but he was a good guy though. That's what he was saying. And then they showed like the allegations. I knew about the well, he would like they showed text messages he sent to girl like he was gonna send them out to some guys, like 2 or 3 guys at a time, and then there'd be like a break and 3 more guys come out, like 3 positions. He talked about like crapping on her head. That I knew about that, but I mean, it was like test text message to her in order to keep her job. I mean, because she would like make 100,000 a year, then it went to 200,000 a year. And I guess he was supposed to pay like $5,000 non-disclosure agreement, and then after like a couple of years, he stopped paying it, and then that's when she came out with all the allegations. And they were talking about like he said like well it's unfounded and stuff like that. He said it worked with law, and then the next day he completely left. He completely left. It's really a great informative show. It's really good. If you want to know what's behind the mask, a lot of stuff I knew about, but a lot of the emotions are there. A lot of the interviews with it, and then they also had like Booker T interview Booker. Well, I said Booker T. They interviewed Tony Atlas, who is very honest in his thing, and also forgot about Paul Heyman, who is also very honest in his things. And he said like he did what he thought was best for business, and that was it. And he didn't care if you were. He didn't care what color you were. The only color he cared about was green. Like Jim Ross would say, all I cared about is putting butts in seats, and that's it. Selling tickets. I think it's uh, a fascinating docuseries on Netflix. I highly recommend it. I think it's well worth a watch. It's really good. And I mean, because John said he didn't know anything about pro wrestling. I'm surprised he didn't get into it as a kid. I know I did. I was hooked into it for a long time. And like I said, like from pretty much when I was 4 or 5, when I knew about who Andre the Giant was, up until 93, 94, and then I got back in 98. And then I was pretty much into it till about 2016, 2017, and then my dad passed away in 2015. I kind of lost interest in it. Tried to get back into it. I watched Dark Side of the Ring a lot. I definitely wanted to watch this. Um, but they said the show is more popular than ever, even though I haven't been watching it though. But I love the show. I give it a 10 out of 10. From Mr. McMahon, the new series that just dropped on Netflix. I highly recommend it. Hope you like this review, everybody. Till next time, please take care and legion. Yeah, you're fired.